Hello, it's Matthew Kalik, and I, for my first topic, want to discuss Mr. Utterson's role in the novel. I believe his role is that of an indifferent narrator. And I say indifferent because he's not a very excitable person, and I think that has to do with his personality as well as his profession of a lawyer. He is able to think from a logical and objective sort of view, while he doesn't let his emotions get into the middle of the fray and start to obscure how he's actually viewing the events that are unfolding around him. As well as that, he's also longtime friends with both Dr. Lanyon and Dr. Jekyll, which means he's able to pick up on the subtle differences and the changes that are happening within these men as these events happen within the novel. So he's able to step back in real time and convey that to the readers through Stevenson's words while not having this fear or this terror make decisions or skew and bias the actual opinions that he may actually have. He's able to just report on the facts, whether they are happening in real time. Some conjecture is in there because he's also trying to figure out what's going on, but still from a very analytical place and not so much just acting on pure emotion. I think that's an important thing to have a narrator to be able to kind of lift that veil so the reader is able to also pick apart what's happening in real time, to think about what they might be assuming is happening or what steps are going to come next. While if we were, for instance, only hearing from Jekyll's side, we would get a very different view of the world in which this is operating, because Jekyll would be fighting his own demons, whether they're good or bad or both, and the mix of that duality would start to put a filter on what's happening. The actual events themselves would become less important because we'd be stuck inside that emotion. So the indifference of Mr. Utterson allows him to narrate in a very real-time manner, which is a very important theme, I think, for this novel. So I also believe within this novel we're able to fit in a narrative around a discussion about addiction. And I believe this for two reasons. The first is the very physical reason of Dr. Jekyll using a substance to make mind and, in this case, physically altering changes about himself. And the physical substance being that crystalline structure in the form of the drug, as well as the liquid phial. These are very physical representations of a substance that he is going to then abuse to make these changes. And it becomes to a point where he has to start doubling and tripling the amount because the effect wears off. Much like any other addiction to drugs, alcohol, where you have to start trying to fight your own tolerance, and where it starts becoming something that changes you without your consent, much like we get to see with Dr. Jekyll, where Hyde begins to take over. The thing that he was using now becomes a thing using him, which is something that we see throughout the psychology of addiction in everyday life with real substances. And I think the second reason being Jekyll makes a reference to how it's like an addiction himself in his own words. And we can see this in the novel on page 49, and I would like to read just a piece of that. So he mentions, "I do not suppose that when a drunkard reasons with himself upon his vice, he is once out of 500 times affected by the dangers that he runs through his brutish physical instability. Neither had I, long as I considered my position, made enough allowance for the complete moral instability and insensate readiness to evil." The sentence goes on, but I'll stop it there so we can talk about it. So even right there in the sentence, he is comparing it to how a drunkard is reasoning with his own addiction, how he doesn't plan for the fact that his actual physical faculties will not allow him to reason that away. That's a losing battle. And just that direct one-on-one comparison, I think, is probably the most blatant way to say that it's definitely a metaphor for addiction. But then there's other mentions throughout the novel. There's also discussions about how he is riding the euphoria of being Hyde and waking up to it, and then the also downfall when he's coming down from being Hyde, and then the repercussions he has to deal with, which is much the same of physical addiction when you have that euphoria of the hit that you allow yourself, and then the shame. They also describe shame, the shame spiral that comes after that abuse. For my essay, I think I'm gonna actually do a compare and contrast between two characters, and I think I'm gonna focus between Utterson and Dr. Jekyll for my comparison. I don't know if I'm gonna stick with that. We're going to start writing and see where it goes. So this is gonna be kind of an exploratory measure until we find out. Some of the things I'd like to compare between them, I will go through right now. So Utterson and Jekyll differ just on appearance alone from the very start. Utterson is described as lean, um, dr- dusty, dreary, and you get kind of like this not so overly impressive vision of him, while Jekyll, on the other hand, is handsome and large and smooth faced. And Stevenson even uses the words well made. So you get this more like prominent, uh, kind of outstanding view of a man. So I think right there, just from the physical descriptions alone, you already see this very contrasting side of the coin, one unassuming and one very prestigious almost. And when we start going into actual psyches, I think that Utterson is very logic driven and he measures every single outcome. He's analytical, like I said in my previous part of the discussion. While Jekyll is logical, he chases the unknown. He has this desire and this drive, almost in perpetual search of something where he wants to discover the unknown, and that keeps him chasing constantly. While Utterson is happy to just kind of be on his own, which leads me to kind of their daily habits. Utterson is happy with his daily routines, his Sunday walk. He eats dinner around the same time. He enjoys kind of the same simple life every day, while Jekyll seems to kind of change daily between his experiments to his career paths to teaching to the group he keeps himself around. We know that he's close with Lanyon, and then the next day he's not. He's always making these changes. Uh, and that leads Utterson to be a very loyal person. He keeps to himself because he has such close relationships to him, being family and then the friends that he's known the longest, it says. And I think this is very different from Jekyll, whose group changes daily because he's well known. Since he was younger, he was wild and outgoing. And I think we see that continue into his adult life. He is a prominent figure in the community. So he has a lot of people around him and a lot of connections at his disposal at any given time. So I think that's a huge contrasting point between the two of them. One is more of a homebody who has two or three friends, and Jekyll, who's surrounded by a community but is really always kind of stuck in his own head and his own constant struggles. Um, and I think there's a lot to dive into in that. I haven't decided how I'm going to organize it yet, or if I kind of want to go into it more. We'll see. I might take out the comparison part and just do one character analysis so that I can go deeper into some of those traits. I don't know. We'll see if we get through this one. Thank you.